Welcome to the MyTech Toolbelt podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Shannon.
And I'm Brenda. And this is a podcast where we highlight educators who innovate, engage, and inspire through the use of technology. Thank you so much for joining us today for episode 46 of the MyTech Toolbelt podcast. Hi, this is Brenda Argano. Wow, what a year 2020 has been. And on top of that, it's an election year. Do your students understand how our government works? Well, now is the prime time to learn while the subject is in the news every single day. Join us as we speak with Neil Wrona, a 7th grade teacher in an alternative school, tasked with teaching these young people how their government works and how they can make a difference to solve local, national, and global problems, all in a very easy to understand and fun way. Also, be sure to subscribe to our podcast because you don't want to miss any of our episodes coming up. Don't forget to check our show notes attached to this episode and on our website, mytechtoolbelt.com, for everything mentioned in this episode. So, without further ado, our interview with Neil Wrona.
Okay, thanks for joining us today on the MyTech Toolbelt podcast. Today we have a very special guest, but before I introduce him, I want to make sure that if you like our podcasts, you are subscribing to our podcast on wherever you listen to podcasts and sharing them with a friend. So hopefully you'll be doing that. Today we are so excited to have Neil Wrona with us today from Baltimore, where he is a social studies teacher at an alternative school. And he's going to be talking to us a little bit about how he's using iCivics in his classroom and how it's really managed to make a huge impact in his teaching and the students' learning. So welcome, Neil.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So to just kick us off a little bit, would you mind just sharing just a little bit of your background and how you ended up first of all, at the school and the students that you're serving, which is an amazing student population?
Sure. Yeah. So basically how I got into teaching was in my undergrad, I went for Communications and Rhetorical Studies. So I learned to argue really, really well. I realized in my junior year that teaching was really what I wanted to do, but that's a little bit late in the process to figure that out. And so I graduated with my bachelor's in communications. I looked into teaching programs and I tried to do Teach for America and those kind of things, but kept getting turned down because I didn't have the requisite courses. So I worked as like a childcare worker until I finally came around like, no, teaching is what I really want to do. So let's just go. I'll do whatever I got to do. And I got into a master's in the arts of teaching program. And then at the end of that, I realized that I was working for a company as a childcare worker that had a school. And so I applied and I went in for the interview and they said, okay, you're qualified and we don't have to train you in the things we normally have to train people. So you're in and we start in 2 weeks. Okay, sure. Yeah. So that's always my story is that, I got my first job just because they didn't have to train me. They didn't have to teach me how to restrain people because I already had that training. But I've come to actually love working in these alternative schools, because the classes are so much smaller and it's more one-on-one. And even though the kids generally are harder to reach or harder to get them to work, honestly, it's more rewarding when it does work, when it does happen.
When you have those light bulb moments with them, right? When the aha moment and they actually can relate to what you're teaching. And I just feel like those are the kids that need me the most, right? Or that need you the most to make connections on, especially what you're teaching, which is history, social studies.
Yeah, especially right now, civics.
Right? Because they have to know the impact of what is happening to them. So you got 2 weeks notice and then you're in a classroom and you're teaching. And at the same time, you had just finished your program, your MAT program.
And what ages are you being thrown into?
Yeah, so that was probably the most interesting part of this is that, if you wanted to go into a master's of arts in teaching for high school, you had to have a specific area that you wanted to teach. And the way my undergrad program worked, I was able to take just about whatever I wanted. And so I didn't have enough prerequisite courses in anything to qualify to teach social studies or to teach math or science or English. And so, okay, elementary. if the goal is, to help kids be prepared as an adult, where is a better place to start than elementary? Like if you want them to have a love of learning, it's really got to start in elementary. And so my math degree was in elementary. But my plan was always, okay, as I go, I'll gain more certifications and I'll eventually get to high school, and I'll, probably, I love social studies, so I'll probably teach social studies. But working in an alternative school, what you quickly learn is you do what they need you to do. So when I got hired, I was hired initially for what we called a hybrid high school program, which was literally like just high school students that aren't prepared to transition from one class to another. They work better in one class all day, maybe two classes, with the same teacher all day. And then before the school even started, I was told, oh, wait, no, we need you in middle school. So we're going to make you the middle school teacher, which is still self-contained. It's still same teacher, same kids all day. And I got eaten alive. It was not good. I was not ready for that even a little bit. But I got personally very lucky that the social studies teacher that they had hired never showed up. That's how I got into high school social studies. And then since then, I have certifications in elementary, secondary general, government specifically, secondary social studies, biology, and just special education.
So now they can move you anywhere almost.
Yeah.
And so you saw this need, right? Like you wanted these kids to be as passionate about social studies, civics, history as you were, because you're extremely passionate about what you teach. And I love that, because I really feel like when a teacher is passionate and loves what they teach, that enthusiasm and that passion usually carries over to the students, where they think, why is this guy so passionate about this? Maybe I should pay attention. It usually carries over. So you had this need, right? So tell us how you came across Icivix. So after you tell us that, I want to talk about what Icivix is and where it came from, because that's a fascinating story for people that don't know about it.
So I mentioned getting just dumped into high school social studies. The way I found iCivics was purely out of necessity. One of the detractors for being in an alternative or a non-public school is that in a public school, a lot of times you walk in and they're like, hey, everything you need, all your lesson plans, they're already here. All you got to do is deliver them however you want to deliver them. Or you can make your own if you want, but here's everything you would possibly need to make this work if you want to. But in an alternative school, they go, here's a textbook. You can figure it out from there, right? Go get them. And if you're lucky, you have the lesson plans from the person from the previous year. But I like to do things the hard way. So, for me, my lesson plans have to be very, very, very thought out. I spent a very long time writing lesson plans, which luckily I love that part. But I quickly realized this is not sustainable. Right. And so just Googling government lesson plans, I quickly came upon iCivics. That was all I ever needed, because they have such amazing lesson plans and so many amazing resources that I just fell in love with it, and I've never stopped using it, honestly.
I think that's a great resource, because I feel like a lot more and more these days, teachers are finding that textbook curriculum is not meeting the needs of their students. And we have a saying in the work I do of education technology consulting is a textbook is not a curriculum. A textbook is a textbook, and curriculum is what you add to enhance it. And so I love the fact that you found this. So tell us about iCivics, the program, because there's probably people that don't know what it is, and it's amazing. And so where it came from and that little bit of history.
Absolutely. So in 2009 with Sandra Day O'Connor, I think this was either right as she or just after she retired from the bench, she realized, there needed to be a way to engage students in meaningful civics, essentially saying that kids need to understand what civics is and how they play a role, because realistically, kids and everybody plays a role in our government. And a lot of times it doesn't feel that way. And a lot of times it's because we don't really know the mechanisms by which government works. And so that's what Sandra Day O'Connor wanted to help fix. And so she created this organization called iCivics, and the goal was to make games and lesson plans to help teachers show kids what civics is and how our government works and how we are a part of it in everyday life. Because one of the things I quickly realized from the textbook is that a lot of the things we teach in a government class, they're very conceptual. It's a lot of, well, the government should work this way. The president is going to do this. The Congress is going to do this. And the Supreme Court's going to do this. Or the courts in general are going to do this. It's hard to actually see it at work. Or at least it can be hard to see it at work, to understand how it works. And so with the games that iCivics has created, kids literally get to perform the tasks. So in games like Executive Command, they literally get to be the president and be in charge of all of the departments in the executive branch. And in Lawcraft, they get to actually make laws. They get to do the job of a congressperson, where they have to try to get everybody on their side. They have to make sure laws make sense. And in Court Quest, they literally have to try to navigate the courts. So, they're going to help people try to get from, municipal courts, their local courts, all the way through all of the different stops you have to make before you get to the Supreme Court. And they've done an amazing job making games that are really accessible to kids, elementary to high school, and then making lesson plans to go along with the games and other things. Like it's not just all surrounding the games. They have lesson plans for every topic, every concept in the government curriculum for teachers. And they are very, very well thought out. They are very clear and concise. But it gives teachers room to do what they want to do as well.
Wow, that sounds so interesting. Now, when a student is playing these games, do they play by themselves, or does everyone in the classroom get their own role?
So the games are solo. So each kid can play the game however they want. They're controlling their player. But at the same time, it can be a thing where each kid can be playing, but kids generally want to like, wait, what are you doing? How are you doing this thing?
Right.
Like, wait, I got to this law. I can't get this law passed. What's going on?
Right.
And so they can either talk to you or talk to each other and kind of work it out that way.
And do you have lobbyists?
Ooh, I haven't noticed that. That is the one thing that hasn't been there. And they kind of bake that in to an extent, especially in Lawcraft, because like you have people that are saying, nope, this is the thing I believe, and I'm not getting off of it. So either you come to me or it's not happening. You know?
Very cool. I think this is awesome because you're right. You're absolutely right. When you're learning about these things, they're not tangible. They're very esoteric. It's really hard to grasp what these things are because they're not tangible items. They're just pieces of paper. Right.
Yeah, like studying the Constitution is, if you're just going to look at the Constitution, like, cool, this is a piece of paper. And a lot of my kids are like, God, I have to read a thing? I don't want to read a thing. And one of the other things that iCivics has is these, they'll do these web quests where instead of just, here, read the Constitution, it's, here's a question that I want you to answer. And here's a link where you might be able to find the answer if you want. You can go Google it yourself if you want, because you'll get the same answer probably from the same source. But like, if you know what you're looking for specifically, then they can find it more easily. And a lot of the links are specifically from like, here, you're going to look at Article 2, Section 8 to answer this question. And kids are like, oh, now I know where to find this answer. Instead of just like, find the answer, because I did that a few times where I was like, all of the answers are in the Constitution. Because I thought that was good teaching,
Somewhere in the entire Constitution.
Yeah, it's like,
which was
the Constitution.
Written, but it's also the Constitution, and a lot of these documents are written in a language that is not, elementary or even high school comprehension levels.
No,
they're they're more adult, and like Brenda was saying, they're just more like theoretical. You said this too, theoretical, conceptual, and a lot of your students specifically might have experienced something that might be against maybe what you're learning. So for example, their personal experience might not be what you're trying to teach them. Like, the government usually works out this way. And they're like, yeah, well, my dad, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, okay, yeah, you're right. That maybe didn't go the way we, things didn't play out in the way that, especially kids in alternative schools, sometimes are there because of crimes that they've committed, even at a young age and things like that. At least the one that I was working at. So when we were trying to talk about history and civics lessons for them, they were like, we don't care about the government. Like they're against us and they hate us all, they hate all of my race. And you're like, oh, I can see where that, you're feeling persecuted in that. And so coming up with these lessons that are actually like, well, now you have an opportunity to make a difference because knowledge is power. And
Right.
if you have knowledge, you can stand up for yourself and your family and your friends. When this comes up and it's unjust, it might be unjust because you don't know how to stand up for yourself in a situation like this. You know what I'm saying? So
No, absolutely.
helping them make
100%.
connections, right? Between, there are corrupt people in every job, right?
Mhm.
There's corrupt people in business, there's corrupt people in religious organizations, there's corrupt people in the government, there's corrupt people. But if you know what your rights are and you know how the system works, you can stand up and block that because they're capitalizing or they're taking advantage. A lot of times those corrupt people are taking advantage of the fact that you don't know any better, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's how I try to get kids into what we're talking about. Because, yeah, a lot of times what I get is a lot of kids say, I don't even want to know. I am so either anti-government or so against government. They've been pushed down so many times. Why would I bother? Why would I possibly care about this anymore? You get dinged, you get beat down so many times. You're just like, fine, it's just going to keep happening. So why do I bother?
Right? Like they don't feel they feel powerless because I'm just one person. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. That's what I struggle with. Like that's my everyday thing is like, even if they haven't been beat down, it can be so boring. That's what I love about iCivics is that they do an amazing job of finding ways to show kids what they think and do matters. They're working with organizations that help kids use their voice and speak up and be active members of their local and state governments. I would really love the chance for my students to see that what they think and do really does matter, and it can matter. One of my favorite lessons is from them, and it's part game, part lesson plan. And the game really shows them how to take an idea and turn it into a campaign. Even if it's not like a political campaign, it's a way to get your message out, and it shows them how to do it. That was an amazing game. There were a couple of students who went, oh, I could do this if I really wanted to. I'm like, yeah, you could. Like, it is a lot of work though. I'm like, it is, but if you find something that matters that much, then now you know what to do when you find that thing that matters.
Right. Well, I wish I had this when I was younger because I think the only thing I had access to was that Schoolhouse Rock video, the I'm Just a Bill, right?
Which still works.
Which still works. It's an amazing video.
It is still invaluable. I would use it. During our unit on Congress, I play it pretty much to start every class because it is still invaluable.
Absolutely. But if they had more, I mean, how great would that be? Oh my gosh, this sounds amazing. I need to go on this website.
I'm on it right now, actually. I've been poking around. And one of the things I just found is I'm a big fan of Newsela or Newsela, depending on and I see that back in 2017, they announced a partnership with iCivics. And Newsela is one of the very, very few English language arts adaptive. Because it is adaptive, it'll adapt to different reading levels. And it's new content. They're constantly bringing in new relevant content daily for students. And so it's one of the very few that I, as a consultant, recommend for blended and personalized learning type softwares for English language arts. And I love the fact that they're partnered because it means that when you're assigning these activities and when you're thinking about your lesson plan, you would have access to Newsela's current articles that might be relevant. And I'm telling you, or you're going to tell me, this is a relevant, rich time that we're living in with the executive branch and some of the decisions that are being made, good and bad. There's probably a lot of information out there that might show either understanding and how things are playing out based on current articles that are in Newsela or just in the news in general, and how they're playing out in history right now, or showing how history can repeat itself. Right. And
absolutely. Oh my God. Yes.
As a civics teacher, you're probably thinking this is like unprecedented time where I'm getting like real information coming in that's directly related to either an injustice or a potential, this feels injustice, but it's actually playing out the way the government set it up or whatever. which I think is exciting. I mean, I think is exciting
yeah.
one way or another. I mean, for good or bad, this information that's coming in is teaching lessons. So if you're feeling yucky about what's happening, the only way to solve that is what's your voice, what's your position, get out, vote, get out and start a campaign, right? Or get out and, make sure your parents are voting, or when you're able to vote and getting all that stuff. But if they don't understand how the system works and they really legitimately think that their voice doesn't matter, that's a problem, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But one of the cool things is when they made that connection with iCivics and Newsleah, they created this new game that went along with it called Newsfeed Defenders. Because one of the things that probably the hardest about our current political climate is, I mean, we hear about it all the time. What is fake and what is not fake news? And so one of the things that iCivics wanted to do was create this game that would help kids identify, okay, this is fake news, this is not fake news. And it doesn't say anything, they are completely nonpartisan, so it has nothing to do with that. It's literally giving you the skills like, here's what to look for in a good news article. Here's what to look for in a good research study. Here's what to look for in a good scientific study. The examples that they use in the game have nothing to do with current climate or anything. It's literally just in the game, kids are asked to basically run a fake social media site, where one of the biggest things that hasn't really been talked about a lot recently, because nothing else has gotten talked about a lot recently, other than this pandemic, is whether social media sites should be allowed to delete content that's fake news. And so their job is to be one of those people that goes in and deletes things, or at least maybe not deletes it, but like comments and identifies, hey, this isn't necessarily the best use of polling or best use of research. And so that was a game that I got to demo, and I went, this is not an easy game. But the games are always made in such a way that kids really get into it. Even though like I'm sitting here as an adult going, ooh, like I'm tired. I'm tired from playing this game.
It's work.
My brain is like, all right. The kids, they love it. They create these games in such a way that they're accessible and just fantastic for kids, which is amazing. And the other thing that you mentioned was in voting. So one of the hardest things for a lot of kids, and honestly for most adults, is how do you know who to vote for? We talk a lot, like all the time, about presidential campaigns, but in reality, the ones that are going to matter more to your everyday life are the local ones.
Right.
And so I remember specifically in the fall, I got to beta test, and my class got to beta test a game that's now out called Cast Your Vote, where it literally gives kids the skills they need to go out and research their local candidates. They learn about, oh, okay, I can look on the internet. There are town hall debates that are usually posted somewhere on the internet, even if I can't go to them. Pretty much everybody has a website. And so it literally shows kids like, this is all you have to do to learn about the candidates. And yet it can be work, but if you do a little bit at a time, so in the game, they have 21 days to learn about the candidates and to compare and contrast who's running, who believes what. And so it's all these things that are like just perfectly aligned to Common Core, but super engaging and educational and informative in a way that I certainly never would have come up with, oh, this is how I teach voting, or how I'm going to teach my kids to be ready for voting.
I wish adults would go on and play some of these games. I mean, really,
Absolutely.
like there's a lot of, and I'm saying that because there's just a lot of, myself included, I think I could benefit from learning some of the strategies because oftentimes I want to be like, I want to stand up to you, and I know that's fake news, and I know that,
oh my God.
And it's not that my position is right, because there's flaws with everything, but at the end of the day, you're like, I'm very passionate about education, and like researching candidates is very, very difficult. And I have 2 voting adult children now. And so we spent a lot of time going through our voting pamphlet. When it came to just our local stuff, It was very exciting. And we kind of went through and just really went through our books and said, is this person aligned with what I think? And trying to teach my kids that, they don't have to be a party. They can vote for a person who is more aligned in one thing. and a different person who's in a different party that's more aligned with this other thing. And so we spent a lot of time trying to say, we're not voting for just middle-aged white men, like, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
that, like, I was like, well, we can't really, like, that's not a good voting strategy, right? Like,
Right.
we need to actually say, let's look at what this person stands for, and let's look at what this person stands for, and then kind of make some decisions. And now we are coming up into an election year. And so this is obviously going to be impactful for not only your class, but potentially for classes all across the nation who can get legitimate skills. And if these kids, your kids, our kids, anybody who's using this, if they're taking this home to their parents, these skills, right? These understanding how to research, how to spot fake news. Again, it's not a political. I love the fact that this is no partisan.
They have
no bias whatsoever.
No bias whatsoever.
Which is very difficult, I think. Yeah. And so I feel like, because all out there on the late night shows and the Jimmy Kimmels and the Jimmy Fallons and there's definitely people that listen to those, and that's where they're getting their information for good or bad. So just having this understanding is so key. This is free, by the way. So I don't know if you said that earlier, but this is a free software, free online.
Yep, for everything is completely free. Yeah,
everything's completely free.
It's never cost me a dime, which is also an amazing thing, because unlike public school teachers, which don't get anywhere near enough, they get maybe a few $100s stipend at the beginning of the year. We get nothing. I'm lucky enough that I can go to my boss and ask, hey, here's this thing. Can I try it? Can you give me $100 to try this for the year? And if it works, then maybe, but I've never had to ask for anything. It's been, again, an integral part of how I've engaged my students in government for 7 years now.
Neil, you mentioned you work at a alternative school. Can you define exactly what an alternative school is?
Sure. Yeah. So the way the short, easy to understand way, maybe not the most appropriate way, is I get the kids who have been kicked out of their public school. Okay. So it is in law that all kids up until the age of 18, between the 18 and 21, have the right to a public appropriate education. So if you get expelled from a school, you're not just hanging out at home for the rest of your life. You still have to be educated somewhere. Never occurred to me when I was a kid. I never knew these schools existed until I was hired by one. And so, my school is Youth in Transition, and it's a non-public special ed school where we take students who they are no longer appropriate for the public schools in general, either because their academic needs are too high, or their behavior is too disruptive, or both. Generally, it kind of comes to both. Because if your academic needs are that high and you can't get the help you need in public school, you end up acting out.
Right.
And so your behavior becomes a part of it's a symptom of the issue. And so that's how I get kids. Now, we are publicly funded. Basically, the public schools are paying for us to educate the kids. So we only, basically, if the public schools decide, we're just going to keep all the kids and just deal with it that way, I don't have a job. But that hasn't happened yet. So.
And are they there, like once they arrive, they're there until completion, or sometimes they're there and they leave and they go back to the public schools? Okay.
There are a few kids that we've seen, they end up there either because they made one really horrendous mistake, or they were just hanging out with the wrong kids, and those kids did something horrible and they got caught up in it. And then they have the ability to work their way back out. But it's an unfortunate similarity to our prison system, unfortunately, in that once you're in, you've got to work 15 times as hard to prove that you belong back in the public schools.
Right. Because
basically in order to get kicked out, you only have to do a few things, but you got to do a lot to show that public school that you're ready to come back. Mm-hmm. So we've had a lot of kids get really, really close and have meetings going, hey, listen, another 3 months, show us you can keep doing this for another 3 months, and you can come back. But of course, all the kids hear is, oh, I'm going back to public school. And so they ease up, they do whatever they're going to do. And sometimes, I think a lot of times it's a, shoot yourself in the foot kind of thing,
Right.
where, they're so excited, they're so anxious for that to happen, but they don't really know what's, the anxiety of, oh my God, I could actually get this thing. And then they just blow it up because there's a lot of anxiety. Pretty much all of our kids have some sort of anxiety about, either their home life or school life, or generally just have high levels of anxiety in general that are holding them back.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of what I love to work with. I have a sister who's a social worker and my wife is a social worker. So having them has been an incredible resource for me, as a teacher, because it would be really easy for me to go, just a bad kid. It's just a kid who doesn't want to learn, doesn't care to learn, doesn't care about anything other than what they want to do. But that's almost never it.
Right.
You don't keep coming. If that was really the case, they just stop coming. If they really don't care, they just don't come to school. But the kids who come every day and are just a pain in your butt every single day, they want to learn. They just haven't figured out a way to express that, or they haven't been engaged in a way that's going to help them.
Right.
So, and that's my goal in it every day, is just try to find something that's going to engage some of these kids.
Right.
And if they show up, that's all you need, right?
Absolutely.
When they don't show up, you feel like your hands are a little bit more tied. But
yeah,
if they're showing up, you got to put it on for them. You got to figure out how that works.
Absolutely. And that's one of the hardest things about working in an alternative school like mine, is that sometimes you get kids come in and then they act like they don't want to learn. It's like, well, then why did you come today? Why are you here? Like, are you here just to make my life difficult? And if you can actually have that conversation, it's a miracle. But if you can read between the lines and kind of interpret what they're saying, because they're never going to, the kids that I get are never going to come out and say, here's why I'm acting out.
Right.
You're going to have to read, you're going to have to either drag it out of them, or you're going to have to read between the lines, like, oh, okay, something happened at home. Okay. All right. That's fair. I get that. I understand. And I tell kids a lot of times, like, listen, for me, growing up, school was sometimes a place to get away from everything. I could just turn everything else off. Like anything that was going on anywhere else with, just at home, or especially as a teenager, something's always bothering you as a teenager.
Right.
Something's always just, and so school was place, okay, I can just, whatever is happening elsewhere, I'm just going to look at this, whatever's right in front of me. And a couple of kids have been like, all right, fine. And we can go back in and we can have a class. We can actually learn something that day.
Kids are like onions. They have layers.
Oh,
Our
so many layers.
So many layers.
But the frustrating part with the population I'm working with now is that they don't want you to know that.
No. Yeah,
they just want you to think, no, I'm hard. Yep. I'm hard. That's it. I don't have feelings. I don't care. You can't hurt me. Okay. I get it. You can't let me know that. Yeah. All right. I see you.
Well, and I think, just kind of going back to your student population, iCivics is not just for your student population. This is really for this. This is for
everybody.
Everybody.
Absolutely.
And again, I'm going to go back to saying, if you're an adult who maybe feels like they can't remember a lot of the stuff they were taught in high school, middle school, or have a young person at home in this time of pandemic, this would be a great summer exploration that you could do with your, middle school and high school kids, just kind of on your own. You basically just create an account, log in, and can start working through some of these games with the kids. I know I'd love to do it just with my middle schooler.
And that's one of the nice things about this time. As hard as this has been, this remote teaching, remote learning, just being at home all the time. I have a year and 3-month-old, and so I get to work. Maybe I can work 4 or 5 hours a day, and so I have a lot to do. And I know I'm not the only one. I have a 15-month-old. That's relatively easy compared to parents who are trying to teach their kids and do their job, and just keep all the plates spinning. And so that's one of the things that I've really tried to embrace about this, is that as a teacher, I'm just assigning things right now and just hoping that kids are doing them. And so I've been assigning a lot of games, a lot of iCivics games, and just saying, go ahead and play it on the tablet that we've had to give out to all our students. And maybe the parents will, see over the shoulder and be like, oh, what are you doing? And maybe that starts a conversation, where kids can talk about, what they're learning with their parents. And maybe the parents go, oh, okay. And maybe they go check it out. Maybe they play. Like I said, a lot of these games have taught me a few things.
So now that you've talked about your students, how do they feel about iCivics? I mean, do they find it engaging enough to keep them interested? Are they enthusiastic?
Yeah. Oh my God. It is sometimes the only way I can get their attention. There are times when I'll kind of get away from iCivics for a little bit and kind of do these other lesson plans that either I found or I created myself. And inevitably, things go off the rails in the classroom. And, I go through a week of not being able to get anything done. And I go, okay, what's different? What did I change? Oh, I haven't done anything with iCivics in a little while. Maybe we want to get things back going there. And so I can still remember the very first time I ever played a game was, like 7 years ago when one-to-one schools were just starting out, and we certainly weren't one of them. The school I'm at now, just last year, just got enough computers to be close to one-to-one. So the only way I could get kids to play these games as a whole class, which is not always the easiest thing to do, because when they're playing on their own, I can just circulate around the room, which is great. But as a whole class, I've got to go, okay, I've got to have this up on the board where everyone can see it, and I've got to engage them and hope to God this game engages them enough that they stay focused. And it did. And I was amazed to the point where I played executive command as a whole class the first time, and kids were just yelling out answers. And I would say, okay, let's do that. And then the kids said, oh, I want to play. I want to play by myself. I'm like, okay, the only way you can play is on my computer and on the board. And they're like, cool. And I'm like, wait, you're all on board with it? Like, you'll all just watch this kid play? They're like, yeah, okay. And of course, they made fun of him every time he did something wrong. And then, but then that got the conversations going. Like, why was that wrong? What happened? And then the kids were like, well, I could do this way better. Oh, okay. Well, you go ahead. His turn's over. You go. And then they made fun of that kid. And then, that's literally how I did this when I first started. Was we played the game together, and then kids just took over and said, I want to keep playing. That was a big oh, this is really working.
That's okay. Huge.
And so what I'm hearing is I always feel like if it works for this population, this group of kids who are probably some of the most difficult to reach and to engage, this is going to be an amazing tool, not only for other folks that are teaching in alternative schools, but like if you're in a regular traditional school, Catholic school, private school, charter school, homeschool,
absolutely,
all of it, like this is going to engage your students hopefully in a way that they have not been engaged before. One of the things I did see on their website is that you can donate to them. So they are a nonprofit, and how they keep things going is to buy donations. So if anyone wants to continue the work that's being done with iCivics, consider making some donations to them so that this can keep going and stay free for everyone and accessible to everyone's tax deductible. So definitely consider that. I love being able to make contributions to places like this that keep that going. So thanks.
Absolutely.
For that.
And one of the other things I really like that they do, so when you log in, when kids log in, they can either just play on their own, they don't have to log in, they don't have to do anything, or they can make an account, or you can make them an account as a teacher, and they can earn points. They earn points just for logging in. And so a lot of times what I'll see is kids like, oh, I got 500 points just for logging in? I got points? That's awesome. And sometimes they never think any further about it. Then sometimes like, oh, I get points. Great. Gamification is real and it's awesome. It's great. It works. But I've had a couple of kids go, why do I get points? What am I going to do with those points? I'm like, Well, it's a good question. Once you gain enough points, you can actually donate your points to a charity that iCivics will then, I guess, once a month, once every so often, they take whichever charity, whichever set of charities they have for that month, whichever one has the most points, they're going to donate however much they can donate that month or that week or that quarter.
Wow, that's awesome.
So it's one of those things that like sometimes we see, gamified, education is just, oh, you got points, cool. It doesn't mean anything. And some kids are just turned off by that. But then you tell them like, oh no, you can actually do something with it. And you can make a difference in your community if you want to. And that kind of gives them another way to say, we can make a difference.
And it's not costing them any money. It's not hurting them in any way. Their actions are helping be positive. And so they're realizing that that's like a volunteer.
Yeah.
It's a charitable contribution of their time, basically, that is making a difference in the world. That's awesome. I love it. Well, Neil, thanks for sharing. Did we cover kind of all the big items? Because it sounds like this is something. I mean, I'm ready to log in and get my kid going on this for the summer. Brenda and I are going to be taking my civics classes over the summer. But
because when I was
so much more.
Right. When I grew up, I didn't learn anything except for my senior year of high school as far as government goes.
Yeah.
And that's certainly not enough time.
Yeah. And one of the things I really love, where I live in Maryland, they actually have a state mandate where, you've got to have, there's elementary school, usually fifth grade. You learn a little bit about civics. Middle school, 7th or 8th grade, I think it's 8th grade, you learn a little bit about civics. And then high school, you're going to go really in depth on government. And that's fantastic. And I wish that were every state. I'm very lucky to be teaching in a state that does have that mandate, but not every state does. One of the organizations that I've been connected to is an organization where they're lobbying for better civics education among the states and just in general. But yeah, so I mean that's one of the other things, that being part of their the educators network, which is one of the ways that iCivics really they are amazing at engaging in teachers. I mentioned getting to demo things and getting to beta test games and give feedback and say, I like this, but I'm not sure about this part of it, and just getting connected with more civics-minded professionals and teenagers for that matter. There are a lot of kids who are engaged in civics that, you maybe don't see, but I've gotten to see just how engaged a lot of young people can be. And it's amazing.
It's making a difference, man. It's making a difference. That's all we could do. Just give them knowledge and hope they
give them the tools.
Hope they make the right decision.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. And that's what iCivics is all about. I think if, summarize, they're all about giving kids tools. They're not going to tell you what you have to do with it. They just want you to have the tools to make decisions. That's amazing. That's really what teaching's all about.
That's right.
Giving kids tools, because I try to tell my kids this all the time when I feel like they're just leaning on me like, oh, you're going to read it, right? You're going to read this. Listen, I'm not always going to be around. You're going to graduate at some point.
Right.
And I'm not going to be here to read this for you anymore.
All right.
So it's time for you to do it.
Totally. If you're teaching them to fish. And I think that's honestly, it's why we created this podcast, is that we wanted to give educators that same opportunity of exposing them to products like this, tools like this, that they can put in their tool belt. And while this might not, meet their needs at this exact moment, maybe next year, if they're continuing into this, sheltering in place or preparing for some kind of a hybrid, or heck, you're going back to school and this is great. Why not incorporate something like this into your lessons if you haven't already, if you knew nothing? And I can tell you that I only started recently hearing about iCivics, probably in the last 12 months, from you and from a couple other folks that had said, you should check this out. And Brenda and I were like, okay, we'll check it out. And then we got busy and life got busy, we didn't check it out. And then now we're kicking ourselves. Let's talk about this. And I'm like, of course we should be talking about this. And now more than ever, we are set up for folks listening to this episode to log in, create an account, I've already done it. I've already logged in and created an account. I'm ready to learn myself. I'm ready to get my kids on it.
Yeah, and the nice thing for teachers is that it kind of functions as, a modified teaching platform as well, where you can set up your class. Like my students are not going on and setting up their own account. That's not something that my kids are going to do. So I can create accounts and passwords for each of them. And then what I do is I have a folder for each student in each class. And I just put a sticky note. I just write down your username and password, put it on a sticky note, put it on the inside of their folder and say, that's that. And so they go, I don't know how to sign in. Oh, here it is. It's in your folder. And then if I absolutely need to, which the usernames are usually long and complicated, but that's because they have so many users. You have to have a very complex algorithm to create these usernames. So a lot of times I end up having to type in their usernames on my own. But if that's my biggest problem, I'll take that a million times. Because what the teaching platform allows you to do is assign classwork and then track their progress. I can see what they're writing as they write it. And so if they're just hitting the keyboard and saying, look, I finished all of it. I'm like, yeah, but I can see your answers. And they're not great. So you want me, I can open this back up for you. Would you like me to do that? No. Okay, well, I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm going to sit right here with you and we're going to do it.
That's awesome. This is an amazing tool. I know Brenda and I appreciate your time today just talking about it.
Listen, I'm actually, that was the other thing I wanted to say is I wanted to pay it back, honestly, because what you guys have done is genuinely been incredible for me. So I had found this podcast before the pandemic hit, and I kind of been listening here and there. And then as soon as I had all this, I had a couple of weeks of we didn't have anything we could do. I pretty much listened to everything, and we are now planning to, we're trying to do our summer session because we're actually an 11-month school. We have to do our entire summer session online, and I went, how do I do this? Okay, because I'm also the technology facilitator, and so I'm trying to figure out, okay. And then I went, wait a second. I heard about this. I remember listening to the podcast on Nearpod. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Nearpod, and I went, yeah, but what was it? And so I literally went back and just re-downloaded the Nearpod cast, and I went, yeah, this is exactly what we need. So
that's awesome.
We're about to hopefully roll that out for the summer.
Awesome.
Great to
hopefully
hear.
It makes things a little bit easier.
Well, we made a difference.
No, you guys have made. And then I also have a list of things I want to try on my own, but I'm like, okay, I need one new thing we can do right now. And I think will be relatively easy for our teachers to pick up because, at an alternative school, it's hard to find teachers at times.
Sure.
So, if there's a lack of teachers in the public school, there's a big lack of teachers in alternative schools.
Right.
So finding something that's easily digestible and can genuinely make a difference in teachers, people who didn't think they would ever be teachers who are now just doing this thing. Mm-hmm. Anything I can do to make their lives better. And that's exactly what you guys are doing. Is helping me find stuff.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's very validating to hear that. So we appreciate that. We sincerely appreciate that. So why don't you let our listeners know how they can get a hold of you? Because you've shared some resources with us that we'll put up on the website. If somebody has a question about iCivics getting started, they're in an alternative school, they want to connect with you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can be any school. It doesn't much matter how, it doesn't have to be an alternative. I've also taught at a public school. So anything you need on Twitter, it's at NeilWrona. That's my name. At Neil Wrona on Twitter. My email is LNWRONA@gmail.
Thank you for sharing this stuff. Brenda, you had another question you want to ask.
I actually have two questions. One of them is we always like to ask our teachers if they have any books they'd like to recommend that have made an impact on you, either personally or professionally.
This was one of my favorite books. It's now backwards, but it's called 4Fs, The Firm, Fair, Fascinating Facilitator. I think I got that between my second and third years of teaching, and it changed everything I was doing. At the time, I was probably honestly just trying to get by. But this really helped me realize that I need to be more firm. I need to be more like, these are the rules. Here's what's going to happen if you break them. Make sure those things are fair. I got to have lesson plans that are fascinating. I got to find things that are really going to engage kids, which iCivics has been incredible for. I already had that kind of locked down for my government class, at least. And then being a facilitator. That was the part that really changed my perspective on what it meant to teach. Those first three are pretty basic. You'll find them in any teaching book. But the facilitator, that was the one where I went, my job isn't to give them the information. My job is to help them find it. My job is to help them, to facilitate them finding the information. And that really changed everything. Mm-hmm. So it's a book by Robert Ward called The Firm, Fair, Fascinating Facilitator.
Very good. Thank you. I have not heard of that one.
Yeah. Me neither. I'm searching it on Amazon right now.
And then one more question for you. Since we are a tech tool belt podcast, we like to hear if you have any stories on when tech maybe didn't go as planned, maybe didn't go quite as well as hoped.
You mean everything from the last 2 months, pretty much. So I mentioned that I'm the technology facilitator. So I started with that, and now it's taken on a whole new role in the land of the pandemic. So my job when this all went down was I had a week to figure out how are we going to do distance learning? What's the technological aspect going to look like? So we handed out Samsung tablets to every kid because the laptops we had at the school were set up in such a way that if you steal them, because our kids have done that, have stolen the laptops, if you take it away from the school, it won't connect to any other Wi-Fi other than the school's Wi-Fi. Now, obviously, we could change that, but that was going to take a lot of time from our tech department. And so we'll get tablets and we'll send them out to all the kids. And then the biggest problem that we realized we had was that if you make a video on your iPhone, that is saved as a .mov, as a QuickTime video. If you then just upload that to Google Classroom and say, here's the video, kids, they try to open it and it's not going to work because their tablet can't play that QuickTime video. And so, that was the first big issue that we had was, oh my God, kids can't see any of the videos. Now what do I do?
Now what?
Yeah. And I just remember I was on the phone with people. I'm going, I can't do this right now. I can't. That first week was just terrifying and really, really hard because I can't just leave my daughter and go do this thing. And if I try to do it while she's there, she's going to run amok and bad things are happening. So I had to learn how to separate the two and be like, okay, I can only work before she wakes up, after she goes to bed, and during naps. Those are the only times I can work. And I have to be able to figure out how to fix all of those problems. And so what I ended up figuring out for that particular problem was that there are Google Classroom, and Google's platform in general is amazing. It has converters built right in. So you can, if you save it to a Google Drive and you open it up on your computer, there's, in the drop-down menu, there is a convert this to something else. And so as annoying as it was for teachers, if they made it on their iPhone, they had to upload it to Google Drive, get on their computer, transfer it into this other program online, and then make it into an MP4, and then download it back onto their computer, and then re-upload it again. And that's a lot of work, and some of our teachers have still had to do that. That was the main reason I had to buy a new computer when this all went down, is because my computer was moving slow enough where this isn't possible. So that was the most recent one.
Yeah, it's
figuring
rough.
out how to fix that.
Right. And figuring this out on the fly, and having everybody waiting for you.
Yeah, and I know I'm not alone. I know everyone is doing this same thing. I was lucky enough that I started this year with my government class, trying to start a blended learning thing. So I at least had tried this whole thing out. I had done parts of it, and so I had an idea of how to do it. But if I hadn't done that, we would have just been winging this entire thing completely.
I want to point out, though, Neil, that what the position you were in was very much like I have this problem and I need to solve it.
Mhm.
And I need to think about it. I need to test some things. I need to, you basically used a design thinking model, right? You
Right.
identified a problem,
Yep.
you thought about it, you prototyped it, you tested it, and then you retested it. You tried something
Mhm.
new, it didn't work, and then you rolled it out to your school. And those are skills that our students need to have
Absolutely.
because that is a real world situation of a real adult, you, who
Mhm.
was faced with a real world problem at your job that honestly had an indirect relationship to what you actually do for a living, right?
Right.
Indirectly related to teaching. You came, your school and you as an educator
Mhm.
came upon a situation that was like, holy moly, I'm not prepared for this. I have some or no training in this whatsoever. My district
Mhm.
gave me no training in this. What do I do? Understanding how to Google search, how
Yeah.
to really effectively Google search.
Yep.
Are we teaching that in schools? I know that I have had teachers come to me and say, I'm really stuck with X. What do I do? And I literally Google it and go, step
Yeah.
one, step two, step. And they're like, I have been on Google for 4 days trying to find it. And I'm like, but you weren't Googling properly,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the right scenario and the right words. And although
Yeah. The
Google is very
particular
powerful,
words.
exactly. And so really how to do that. But where I was going with this was that grit and that design thinking process that you just inherently have
Mhm.
may or may not have been taught to you as a procedure, but it's something that if you can explicitly teach in school, of having kids have this intrinsic motivation to figure out how to solve a problem, and B, give them the tools and the skill set to figure out how to solve the problem, and then teach them some just basic design thinking, they can solve these things, and or at least get connected to a community that might be able to solve it, or find a YouTube video that's close that they could test something. And I am a firm believer in that type of because content, I can always find the content, right?
Mhm.
Kids, adults, human beings, there's more content on the internet
Oh my
now
God.
than there ever has been, and it's like quadrupling every so many minutes the content that's being created and put on the internet. So I feel like if I know how to get it, if I have that process and that grit, that's almost more important than understanding a date or a time or whatever. If I can apply it to my real life, yours was a real life problem,
Mhm.
like with a deadline and a kind of a time sensitive issue.
Yeah.
But like you, I find that just taking a walk and clearing my head and
Oh yeah.
just, thinking about things. I often will tell people, okay, I need to marinate. That's what I call it when I do it.
Mhm.
Brenda's probably heard me say it. I need to marinate on this a little bit, and it will come to me, and usually in the craziest of times, but it's usually the way it's supposed to. My brain just needs time to kind of process. And we don't give kids sometimes time to do that. Right? Like
Mhm.
sometimes we say, well, your
Yeah.
assignment's due in 2 days. You have 48
Yep.
hours. Go. And they're like,
Yeah.
okay, first of all, I can't be creative. I'm just going to regurgitate information.
Mhm.
You're not allowing me to think or test or prototype. Or they give you 3 months to do a project and then you've lost the children already.
Yep.
You
Yep.
cannot give a child 3 months to do a project because you know when
Nope.
they're going to do it? The 4 days before it's due.
Sure are. Yep. Oh,
There's-
I see it every single time. Yep.
There's no point in that.
Yeah.
You're right. A lot of teachers are and will still be in the fall, some kind of
Mhm.
space of this impact of the pandemic. And I think having some grit and having some, things that they need to marinate on, opportunities for them to think about it, knowing that they're not alone in this journey is, I think, super helpful because a lot of teachers really do feel like they're alone and
Yeah.
that they may or may not have support at their school sites. So thank you for sharing that. I mean, you're right. Like pretty much everything that could have gone wrong did. I had a day, where like I was given a workshop to 70 people online and my computer literally crashed in the
Oh,
middle of the workshop. And I'm
yeah.
texting a people I know on the workship and I'm like, are you guys still in the Zoom room? Like, cause my computer's totally dead. I got to figure this out.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And then my audio didn't work. It was a mess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tech
If
fails.
you guys have, it's not technically a tech fail, but it's one of my favorite stories to tell from the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So again, as a technology facilitator for graduations, my job is to basically set everything up and get everything running. And we have very small graduations, and sometimes we have off time graduations. So we had a couple kids, I think 3 kids who were graduating last winter, after in January last year. And my wife was 9 months pregnant at that time. And so on the day of the graduation, I'm like setting everything up. I literally had to drive out to Home Depot and grab just an extension cord because I was tired of asking people to borrow one. And I get everything all set up. And the minute I'm like, I think I got this. I think this is all set up. My phone rings. And my wife's like, hey, so I think my water broke. And I'm like looking at everything going, okay, when you say think, you mean, yeah, no, okay, my water broke. We need to go to the hospital. Okay, I'll be there as soon as I can. I think I set this all up and now I have to explain it to everybody.
Right.
And just like hope that they can figure it out and hope nobody texts me because I'm not really available anymore.
Yeah.
But I
for the next 3 months, you're not available.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God. And yeah, I had to use my own personal computer because we didn't have we needed like an old school VGA cord. And so I had to, I guess and my computer was there until I came back like 2 weeks later. There's nothing I'm going to do. Luckily it'll be dead in a few hours. But,
right.
Right.
And how did it go? Did graduation go off without a hitch?
As far as I know, nobody texted me. Oh no, they did text me about what my password was.
Oh yeah, because your computer fell asleep and probably
my computer fell asleep. Yeah, they did that. But no, yeah, everything sounds like it went really well. Awesome. I was sad I didn't get to see the kids graduate because I did like all, I built relationships with all those kids, so that was a little bit sad. But I've gotten to build the relationship with the new kid, so that's good.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, that's, I think when your kid's being born, that's legit.
No, yeah, I kind of had to be there.
You can't be like, hey, just pause for a minute.
Yeah.
I'll be back in 3 hours.
I was able to see 2 of the 3 kids before I left and be like, hey, I'm really sorry, I got to go. But congratulations. The biggest celebration that we have in any alternative school is a kid that's graduating.
Yeah, that's huge.
They have fought through so much more than certainly I had to ever fight through in order to get here. And so I really wanted to make sure I stopped and got to say congratulations. And yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I just saw a video yesterday of some kid. They must have done a drive-by graduation somewhat. They had the teachers standing outside with signs, and then the kids would drive through or drive by. And this kid was just crying. And he's screaming out the window, Mrs. So-and-so, I graduated. And he's like showing off his diploma and he's just so excited and everybody's like cheering him. I knew you could do it. I knew you could do it. And I passed, Mr. So-and-so. Oh, it was just.
It's goosebumps, man.
It totally is.
It's amazing. The kids, they work so hard and this is a sad time when, we don't get to celebrate in the way that they want or they deserve. Because that's rough. But I want to sincerely thank you for your time and your expertise and just sharing with us today and our listeners. This has been an awesome episode and an awesome recording. And so we are ever grateful for you. And we wish you and your students the best of luck during this time and always, obviously.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, no, if you ever want to come back and tell us about anything else, you let us know. Maybe how Nearpod went. We'd love to hear how your Nearpod experience goes over the summer. So check in with us again and we'd love to follow up with you on that. So,
all right. Yeah, absolutely. I'll keep an eye out for it.
Thanks, Neil.
Right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And we're out. Thanks for listening to the MyTech Toolbelt podcast. If you have enjoyed listening, please rate us on Apple Podcasts or send us some feedback on our website, mytechtoolbelt.com. We would love to hear from you. This will help us deliver the content that you want to hear. Thanks. And we're out.